Our next guest comes to us from the University of Michigan, Ben Winger. He is a Ph.D., the assistant professor and curator of birds, Museum of Zoology and Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology. They're at the great school. I'm saying that because Tyler is a Spartan. At the great school.
Let's cover this up right here.
The University of Michigan. Blah, 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 blah.
There you go.
Yeah. That's where my niece goes, though. She is U of M all the way through. Go ahead and, Professor, tell us why you guys are so much better than the Spartans.
Thanks for having me. I think I'll let the Spartans ponder that one, but happy to be here.
So can you give us an analogy? It's great to have you with us because we have an important conversation, but I have to say, when you're looking at your name, how did you get fascinated with birds and your last name has a wing in it? That to me is serendipity.
Yeah, that's been brought to my attention. I guess I could have been a pilot or an ornithologist, but I chose ornithology. I've always been interested in nature since I was a young kid, and became interested in birds in middle school, and just kind of never stopped, and have managed to make a career out of learning about and teaching about birds.
But I love that, as well as your curiosity, because it kind of piggybacks on your name. But on top of that, right now, we're in the middle of a pandemic. The one thing we've noticed, so many people are getting back to nature. And do you think that's going to help foster the love in bird watching? Because every morning, my husband, I live on the West Bloomfield Trail, and my husband and I talk about all the birds that are coming to visit. Oh, it's a cardinal, or it's a blue jay, or, cardinals we always look at as a message from heaven. But it's beautiful that we're getting back to a sense of nature. So do you think in a way this is going to be a positive coming out of this pandemic?
Well, I think it's great with anytime anyone notices wildlife around them and notices birds, and obviously the circumstances are difficult, but if people are taking the opportunity to slow down and look at and listen to what's around them, I think that's great. And usually with bird watching, it's just a matter of exposure. So once people learn a few birds or become more aware of birds than they were before, it usually sticks, and it's something that carries through. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we were also seeing more consequences of quiet streets and less traffic and things like that, which was giving people a new awareness of birdsong. I think probably that has, tailed off a bit as some of our activities are, back on the road. But certainly I've been hearing a lot about people getting interested in birds and birding for the first time, which is great.
So I just saw someone post on my Facebook page. They are, I believe, on the east side of Detroit, and they're seeing a crazy number of wild turkeys return to their neighborhood. What's behind that?
Yeah, turkeys have been in parts of Detroit for a while now. I don't know the whole details of that story, but I've certainly seen wild turkeys throughout parts of Detroit, and part of it is in certain areas, if there's brush or empty lots or things like that, they will be able to take advantage of that and find enough food. And certain animals are just able to adapt more to kind of an urban or semi-urban landscape than others.
We've had a lot of parents now going out with their kids to explore nature because they're home with them more. In some regards, it's even part of their school lesson. How would you, or what would you say to parents who have a kid that maybe have a little bit of interest? How can they continue that interest? Are there any apps that are out there now or new technology to help keep that spirit alive or to help keep fostering that interest?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think with kids, I think kids are naturally interested in the natural world and the outdoors, and so I think one of the main things parents can do is to follow their kids and let their kids show them what's interesting. And it can be small, particularly with young kids. It doesn't have to be seeing a particularly rare or special bird. It could just be whatever. Insects or nature or animal tracks are right there nearby. And I think it's, on the one hand, it's also an opportunity to unplug and get away from apps. But at the same time, there are some great apps to, help foster that interest and keep it going. And so there's a number of field guides for birds where you can look up what kind of bird you're seeing. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology has a app called Merlin, which will actually help you identify birds you're seeing based on their characteristics, and that has increased in popularity a lot lately, and can be very useful for a lot of the birds that we see in backyards and suburbs.
Ben Winger with us, assistant professor and curator of birds at the Museum of Zoology and the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology at the University of Michigan, with us today on the Oakland County Megacast. Dr. Winger, you recently were interviewed in an article with MLive about some unusual birds that are showing up around the state of Michigan. One particular that was spoken about was the Winter Finch, which is experiencing a bit of an invasion through Michigan. Why are we seeing some of these more unusual birds more often now than maybe we had previously? Is it because we're much quieter than we normally are due to the pandemic, or are there other circumstances, maybe weather related or others, that are attracting more of these kinds of birds to come out of the woodwork or to just come to Michigan at this point in time?
Yeah, so what we're seeing now is what scientists call an eruption or an invasion of some more unusual birds, finches, and so we call them winter finches, and there are a number of different species. And what's going on here is that these are birds that they breed and live most of the time in really northern areas. So northern Michigan, the Upper Peninsula, that kind of northern forest, and then all throughout Canada as well. And they depend on the seeds of various trees. So some of them are really tied to pine trees. They can only eat the seeds of certain kinds of pines. Others mainly eat the seeds of birches and other northern trees. And every so often, every few years, these trees don't produce as many seeds. And so the birds don't have as much food to survive that really cold northern winter, and they start to move south. And those movements can be really unpredictable and kind of erratic. So whereas a lot of, when we think of birds migrating, like Canada geese migrating overhead, they go south for the winter and come back north in the spring. And it's very regular and predictable in a lot of ways. With these birds, they don't do these movements every year. And so what we're seeing in Michigan now is kind of once every several year invasion of these birds from these northern forests. And part of the reason it's very noticeable is that these are also birds that come to feeders. And so backyard bird feeders will attract some of these northern finches. And so people can see them really up close in their yards.
I was just going to say that when it comes to our feeders in our backyard, for the individuals and the people out there that love to start their morning, maybe drinking their coffee, looking out their window and seeing the birds out there in the morning, is there something, a specific food that you could maybe put out for them to keep them around through these long winter months that also maybe the squirrels don't like so much as well, because sometimes we don't like to share.
Right. So the two kinds of bird feed that are the best for birds are going to be black oil sunflower, or really any kind of sunflower for some of the larger finches. And then the smaller birds like goldfinches and some of the other small finches like siskins, which are around now. These will go more for thistle seeds, which are much smaller. And with those two, you can kind of you can cover the spectrum really. And those, sometimes people buy a blend of birdseed that has things like millet and other kinds of seeds in it. And that's fine, but it's not quite as nutritious for the birds. It is less expensive though. So that's one of the reasons that people sometimes don't feed pure sunflower, is that's just more expensive. As far as squirrels go, they love all that too. They'll take advantage of it. And so to keep squirrels away from your feeder, you really have to, it's really more of a physical arrangement of the feeders, or buying or making some sort of baffle or contraption that keeps them from being able to climb poles. Of course, squirrels are very clever, so sometimes they can outsmart you, but I think you just kind of have to enjoy the process of constantly trying to keep the squirrels away. And sometimes what they do to get at the feeders can be pretty entertaining in and of itself.
And we've definitely been watching them this year. It seems like in our backyard along the West Bloomfield Trail, we've had an abundance of squirrels, especially black squirrels, eating all of our birdseed as well as all of our pumpkins and all of our gourds and everything else. I've taken to shooting them with the squirt gun. I don't know if it's so successful, but it's humane because I hardly ever actually hit them. So I have a terrible aim. And knowing that, Ben, quickly before we let you go, though, for the people who enjoy this and love to see the birds come to their backyard each and every day, because a lot of people do look at them in symbolic ways. It's not just a bird coming to their backyard. They do see there's a symbolism to the birds visiting their backyard and the beauty of nature as well. What do you think the long-term impact of this pandemic could have on birds in general here in the state of Michigan?
Well, in order to achieve bird conservation and all wildlife conservation, we need to be invested in it, and we need to know something about it. So the more people that are exposed to birds and nature, the more success we'll have in being able to conserve it. And so I would encourage anyone who has just for the first time taken up an interest in birds during the pandemic to look up ways to continue this in the coming years. So there are local Audubon societies or national organizations that foster the interest in conservation of birds. And so there are so many ways to get involved. Birding is also a really social activity at most times. And so hopefully when we're able to be together in groups again safely, though, new birders can join up with birding clubs and go on walks and learn from experts.
Yeah, and that might be the beautiful thing that comes out of this COVID-19 crisis. People have realized the beauty in their backyards in birds, and it has sparked an interest, and they keep that interest going by joining some of these groups, even if they're virtual right now. Like you said, they're social, and then maybe you can join the groups at another time post-pandemic. But it's been great having you with us here. Ben Winger, he is the Ph.D. assistant professor and curator of birds for the Museum of Zoology and Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology at the University of Michigan. I have to tell you, Ben, I'm a former producer of local TV news from back in the day, and I look at your long title, and it would have me scratching my head how I would fit all of that in what we would call a super, which is your name title, because usually you're very limited. But it's been great having you with us. We so appreciate it. I'm coming up with all these bird jokes right now, but I won't share them with you because I'm sure they're just too foul.
Right. There you go.
Just wing it.
You've heard them all, right? Tyler said just wing it.
Exactly. Well, thank you for having me.
Good luck. I'm sure you hear them at Thanksgiving with your family as well.
Oh, yeah.